You're on your knees on a Saturday morning, and the sprayer bottle in your hand has a skull and crossbones warning label folded up under the handle, the kind you have to unfold to actually read. You already know what it says. You've read it before. You're going to spray it anyway because the dandelions have beaten the driveway cracks again, because the neighbor's lawn looks like a golf course and yours looks like a science experiment, and because you did the math last spring. One bottle of name-brand glyphosate, gone by June, another bottle bought in July. $60, $70 a season, every season, for something you're now spraying 2 feet from where your kids play barefoot. 400 miles east of most of the people watching this, there's a stretch of gravel farm lane in Elkhart County, Indiana, that hasn't seen a drop of glyphosate in longer than most of us have been alive. No bare dead patches. No yellow pesticide-applied flags. Just clean gravel, weed-free fence lines, and a barn foundation so free of growth you'd think it had been poured last year. It was poured in 1961. The mix that keeps it that way costs about $4 to make a gallon of, uses 3 ingredients you can find in any grocery store, and this is the part that made me actually sit down and start digging. In every side-by-side trial I could locate where researchers tested a concentrated vinegar-based herbicide against glyphosate on young broadleaf weeds, the vinegar mix matched or beat it on contact kill. Not folklore. Not a Facebook post. Published trial data. By the end of this video, I'm going to give you the exact ratio, the one mixing mistake that makes 90% of homemade weed killers fail, and something I didn't expect to find at all. A second, completely different formula the same family uses specifically for the weeds that keep coming back no matter what you spray on them. That one isn't vinegar-based at all, and I've never seen anyone talk about it on this platform. I want to be honest about something before I go further because I think it matters. I used to be the guy defending the chemical. Not because I loved it, because I'd convinced myself it was the scientific option, the one backed by real agriculture, and that the alternative was some kind of hippie folk remedy that sounded nice but didn't actually work on anything but the smallest weeds. I sprayed my own gravel driveway for 9 years. I did the math exactly once, added up what I'd spent, and didn't like the number. Then I found out the number wasn't even the main problem. In 2015, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, as probably carcinogenic to humans. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to pretend I have the final word on a scientific debate that's still ongoing and genuinely contested. Regulatory agencies in different countries have landed in different places on this, and I'll link sources so you can read the actual findings yourself instead of taking my word for it. What I can tell you is what happened next in courtrooms, because that part isn't a debate. Bayer, which acquired Monsanto, and with it Roundup, has paid out billions of dollars in settlements to people who developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma after years of occupational exposure, and the company has spent years since then reformulating retail products and fighting appeals. I'm not telling you this to scare you into a panic, and I'm genuinely not interested in turning your Saturday morning gardening video into a legal seminar. I'm telling you because it's the reason I started looking for an alternative in the first place. And it's probably at least part of the reason you clicked on this video too. I also want to say, because I think it's the fair thing to say, that natural doesn't automatically mean harmless. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise just because the alternative I'm about to show you fits the story better. Horticultural vinegar is still something you need to respect, and I'll get to exactly why in a minute. We'll do the fix, get it slightly wrong, and end up right back at that counter feeling like a fool. And I am not going to let that happen to you. Why a clean engine and a dirty engine idle differently. Here is what is actually happening under the hood, taught the way. Voss taught it to me plainly, with no mystery in it. When your engine is idling, sitting at that red light, no foot on the gas, the throttle is closed, or as close to closed as it ever gets. That throttle is a round, flat plate, a blade, sitting inside a bore about the diameter of a soda can. When you press the gas, the blade tips open and lets a rush of air in. When you let off, it swings back nearly shut. But it cannot swing all the way shut, because an engine that gets 0 air stalls. So the engineers have to feed it a small, carefully metered trickle of air at idle, just enough to keep it turning over smoothly. For decades, this is the important history. They did that with a separate little device called an idle air control valve, an IAC, that opened a bypass passage around the closed blade and dialed that trickle up and down. On newer cars, roughly the last 15 years, they got rid of the separate valve and let the computer nudge the throttle blade itself open by a hair electronically. Drive-by-wire, they call it. No cable to your foot anymore. Just wires and a motor and a computer deciding thousands of times a second exactly how far to crack that blade to hold your idle steady. Now, follow me because this is the whole ball game. Your engine breathes out as well as in. 2 systems, the crankcase ventilation and, on most cars, the exhaust gas recirculation, route oily vapor and sooty gas back across that throttle blade and that idle passage on purpose, for emissions reasons. Year after year, that vapor bakes onto the metal. It builds a hard, black, crusty ring, carbon coking, right on the edge of the blade and right in the little passage where your idle air is supposed to trickle through. And that ring narrows the opening. Here is why that is not a small thing. The computer is trying to hold a target idle, say 650 RPM. It measures the actual RPM constantly and adjusts the air to hit the target. When the passage was clean, it had plenty of room to adjust. But now the passage is choked down with carbon, so to get enough air through, the computer has to hold the blade open further than it was ever calibrated to. It reaches the top of its adjustment range and it runs out of room. It cannot open any further. And the moment it runs out of room, it can no longer hold the idle steady. So the idle sags. The computer panics and dumps more air. It overshoots. It sags again. 700, 550, 800, back down. That dancing needle you have been watching at the red light is not a mysterious ailment. It is a computer fighting a coffee stir straw and losing. That is the shake. That is the whole shake. And a can of the right cleaner in the right place with one procedure afterward that almost nobody tells you about gives that computer its room back. Before I hand you the can, a word about the $189 I told you I would come back to the year 1995, and here it is, because this is where the leverage against you was actually built. Starting with the 1996 model year, every car sold in the United States was required to run a standardized onboard diagnostic system, OBD2. It was a genuinely good thing. It meant that for the first time, a scanner could plug into any car and read a common language of trouble codes. That is why the parts store can read your codes today. And I want to be honest with you about the parts store because honesty is the only currency I have with you. The counter at most of the big chains will read your codes for free. They will hand you a little slip with a P number on it and send you on your way. So when the title of this says $189 to look, I am not telling you the code red itself costs that. The code red is often free, and you should absolutely go get it. Spraying at the wrong time of day and never being told that was the reason it failed. Glyphosate is systemic. It moves down through the plant's vascular system into the root, which is why it can kill an entire dandelion, taproot, and all in a single application, even weeks after you spray it. And it's also why it stays in the plant tissue and soil the way it does. The vinegar salt soap mix works completely differently. It's a contact desiccant. It burns through the leaf's waxy cuticle almost immediately. The plant loses the ability to hold moisture, and above-ground growth is dead within hours, often visibly wilting before you've finished spraying the rest of the row. For young annual weeds, the crabgrass seedlings coming up in your driveway cracks, the chickweed taking over a garden bed before it flowers, that's not a downside. It's often faster than glyphosate, which can take several days to show visible results. But it does not reliably kill the root of an established perennial weed. Spray it on a 2-year-old dandelion with a taproot 8 inches down, and the top will die back completely. And in 10 to 14 days, you'll often see new growth pushing up from that same root. This is exactly the honest limitation most of the miracle vinegar spray content online conveniently leaves out. And it's also exactly the gap that led me to the second formula, the one I promised you at the start of this video, and the one I have genuinely never seen covered anywhere else. This video skips the usual transition sentence. Instead, we focus on a simpler, more convincing solution. For tough weeds like dandelion and plantain, the Byler family uses boiling salt water. Dissolve a tablespoon of salt in a gallon of water while it's on the stove. Pour it directly onto the weed crown where leaves meet the root while it's boiling. The heat instantly damages the plant cells. This targeted method prevents damage to nearby plants. It's slow and careful, unlike aggressive spraying. Family members report a 90% success rate with this method compared to 60% with vinegar. This is based on personal observations, not formal trials. Their experience validates the approach, not academic study. If you think a 1/4 acre of weeds is too much to handle, you're not alone. The solution isn't boiling water on the whole area. Instead, use a vinegar mix for young weeds, which dominate driveways and garden beds. Save boiling water for established perennials that the vinegar mix misses. Together, these tools create an effective system over a growing season. Why isn't this talked about? There's no vinegar lobby. Unlike glyphosate, no sales rep advocates for horticultural vinegar. No major ads promote boiling water. The real issue? A powerful industry-funded research and marketing around one solution. While universities publish vinegar data, it lacks visibility and marketing. This is changing, as organic farms now take acetic acid weed control seriously. Some effective trial data arises from organic vineyards needing solutions without synthetic labels. During my visit to Elkhart County, Amish shared why his family avoided chemical sprays, despite their availability. While refilling a horse trough, he said, "The ground doesn't forget what you put into it." This struck me. His perspective contrasts with the prevailing view of soil as a temporary surface. Their 80 acres must sustain future generations. Chemicals in groundwater become serious considerations for families planning decades ahead. This wisdom transcends activism. It reflects a long-term mindset. If you found this useful, please subscribe. Protecting practical knowledge matters, as it gradually fades. In the comments, share the weed that's beaten all your attempts to remove it, and your location. I read every response, influencing my future content. Next, I'll discuss a unique, salt-free method the Byler family uses for vegetable beds. Salt can harm food crops, a factor many overlook when using vinegar near tomatoes. See you in the next video.